What up, world? This is the GoalNet recording live from Chicago, and today we are here to talk Optik 2. The set that we're going to review for this deep dive is my personal set, which is the TGN Spec. So I will try and run you through some of the changes I made on my set and why I made them. But mostly I will try and focus on what the stock setup is so that anybody looking to purchase these in the store will have a good barometer for what you can expect and how it maybe compares to Optik 1 or Genetic. I've had the pleasure of wearing all three of those Brian's lines and actually had two different sets of Optik 1, a completely stock set and a TGN spec. So first things first is the graphic. I think Brian's absolutely knocked this out of the park. I was fortunate enough last summer to see a copy of the graphic, and I'd be the number one person that would say, please don't buy a set of gear because of the graphic. Buy what works for you and then figure out how the colorway fits your game. And I was so happy with my TGN spec Genetic 4 that I thought I actually might skip Brian's gear this year. And not that there's anything wrong with this line, but more my old graphic was sick and I was happy with the pads, and it was really going to take a lot to get me out of that set. And the second I saw this graphic, I was like, whoa, that is the best retail graphic we've seen in a while. And that really motivated me to do the set. But of course, it's Brian's, I've got to tinker. And I had to do another TGN spec. So my goal with this was to utilize the stock Brian's graphic, but also make it my own. So what I did was I got rid of a lot of the unused color zones and a lot of the options. And if you check out Brian's Instagram account right now, they are totally sharing every which possible colorway. So if you get this as a stock product, this zone here actually has two colors in it. There should be some vents here, and then you can actually split this zone up and have one color here and one color there, and then there's some other accent pieces as well. So visually that may be a little bit difficult to explain, just looking at my pads, but just to bring that out. And then on the glove as well, you'll have the option for colored fingertips. But this graphic just has so many options where if you're an all white guy, you can do it all white and then kind of get this accent with two tones. You can just get an outer roll, you can just do the bottom, or you can kind of clean it up and go custom. And one other point too with custom is that the slits here, or what I call TGN slits, those debuted on my Genetic set, and I think that's a theme I will try and keep going on any future Brian sets that I do from here on in. So in terms of my personal color choices, anybody's wondering what they're looking at here on the screen, the red is the standard red Gen Pro. The gold here is gold weave, and then the black is the matte black. And then on the sliding edge and down at the boot, we have Brian's red Primo that makes up the OptiSlide technology. So this is matte black, gold weave, and standard red Gen Pro. And then inside the dome logo went with the gold weave as well. So first up, as we do this deep dive, we are going to go through the blocker. And you're probably wondering, why am I starting with the blocker? Because everybody watching this video is probably way more into seeing what's up with the pads or the glove. But believe it or not, the blocker is actually one of the pieces of gear that changed the most going with from Optik 1 to Optik 2. And if you talk to Brian's, I think they're pretty transparent. Every line of gear, as long as people are talking honestly, has its high points and its low points. That's life. That's any product on earth. Think about the car you might be driving. There's probably some things about it you love, some things about it you don't love. By Brian's own admission, the blocker was maybe not the strongest part of the original Optik line, but the goal was to really get it right with the Optik 2. So one of the biggest things that they changed was the sidewall, and they made the sidewall more rigid compared to the Optik 1. So that's the biggest upgrade that we can expect to find on this blocker. And then secondarily, they changed the foams inside the core to give it a harder face for harder rebounds compared with the Optik 1 blocker. So better protection on the sidewall, better harder rebounds are what you can expect compared to Optik 1. compared to Genetic. This board is actually beveled, so you can see anytime we look at it, there's a triangular edge here versus if we look at the Genetic, imagine my finger coming down, we can kind of see that triangle. It would be all squared off. So there's a beveled edge there at the nose and then inside there as well. So this is designed to reduce weight in the blocker board and increase the balance. So that would be one of the changes. And then the other big change is the Genetic would have what I call a two-piece sidewall, where because this is squared off, your sidewall then starts at the bottom of the blocker board versus this sidewall comes all the way to the face. And Brian's really did a good job cleaning this up as well. It's a really clean look. Going off memory, I want to say Optik 1 still had some laces, so this is a super clean look. And then one of the other very minor tweaks is that this blocker has padding inside the mesh finger stall gusset there. One of the things that changed is the padding used to run down a little bit further in the index finger, and it's a little bit shorter where it's just in the fingertip. So this should give you the fingertip protection if any pucks ride up, but being that there's less padding inside the stall, like around your joints and your fingers, should give you better flexibility. Palm here is gonna have the nice textured grip, as well as a really nice soft Nash gray material. We have the pillow, and then the other big change, which is actually the same style you'd get on a Genetic, is the BOA dial. So Optik 1 featured the BOA dial, but it wasn't very easily accessible. So Brian's made a really good system where you pop it open, adjust the BOA dial, and then cover it up for anybody that wants to tweak it. So really good change there as well that I forgot to mention in the beginning, highlighting the changes, is the refined use of the BOA, but that's also a carryover from Genetic. So those are kind of the differences between Optik 1 and Optik 2, and then also between Optik 2 and Genetic 4. Now, if we focus on TGN spec and what makes this different than the retail model, there's a few different things. So again, obviously the cleaned up graphic without any of the unused cut and sew zones. One of the things you won't see is inside the blocker board is the Lexan. I put that in there because I love hard rebounds off my gear. And even though Lexan may add up to a half a pound to the blocker, if you're not familiar with Lexan, it's hard, clear plastic. I believe it's the same stuff used in bulletproof glass, would be pretty similar to plexiglass, the stuff we're all used to seeing in the rink. So it is a big, heavy piece of plastic added to this. So that is one of the custom specs for TGN spec. And then the other one is inside the blocker here. You can see how beefy that pad is coming off the back of the blocker board that your hand actually sits in. And I love this feature because my hand is ridiculously stuck in the blocker. It's got a nice snug feel without having to make the wrist strap too tight. So it feels really connected and you get a ridiculous maximum range of motion. So this is actually triple Anderson spec. So this was a spec that Craig Anderson used to have when he wore Brian. So I tried it once with one Anderson spec pad. On the TGN spec Genetic 4, I got 2. And with Optik, I got a 3rd pad. So when I'm saying pads, it's the number of foam inserts between the back of the blocker board and the glove hand. And 3 is definitely the magic number. This is the fit and feel I've absolutely been dying to use. So really excited to get that out there to see how it performs for range of motion and how the Lexan works, and then also how I find the new sidewall with this. And also a big fan of this pad as well. Love extra air pillows and protection when they're available. So that is the blocker. And again, TGN specs, a couple little tweaks to it. And again, good look at the different color variations with the red, the gold weave, and then the matte black. The red and the gold just really pop off that blocker face beautifully in terms of aesthetics. All right, so next up is the Optik 2 glove. So the glove had a couple tweaks to it, and I think one thing to keep in mind when we're thinking about the Optik line is that the Optik, the name change going from Sub-Zero to Optik for Brian's kind of stiffer butterfly high-tech pad to really denote, or line I should say, not just pad, to really denote that this was a change, this was a completely new product, this isn't the Sub-Zero. It had so many changes, it was really a revolution in terms of the Brian's product line. Optik 2 is going to be a bit more of an evolution. They got so many things right with Optik 1 that the goal with Optik 2 is to take a good thing and make it a little bit better just by refining some of the subtleties. So if we look at the Optik glove, we'll get to what's custom on mine in a little bit, but they kept with the traditional 40-degree break that debuted back on the Sub-Zero and has been available in the Brian's line for a really long time. But one of the things they changed was the inside of the palm. So as you can see, right in the center of the palm, we've got some lacing. That's a feature that debuted on Genetic 4. So if we rewind a little bit back to Optik 1, Optik 1 was really a new era for Brian's for the level of game-ready break that they brought to retail and how well the gloves closed out of the box. They took some feedback and tweaked that concept just a little bit and put it in a 35-degree break for the Genetic. And that big change was the laced-in break, and now they brought that to the Optik line. So the lace-in break does a couple things. It helps the glove close better, and I will do a couple of snap closures in a minute. And it also helps maintain the glove's break. With Optik 1, it actually had a dual hinge where the glove kind of broke there, or the glove broke there, so essentially on either side of the laces. And then depending on how you closed your glove and how you tied it up, that would determine your glove's break. And they found that they were better off just sticking with the consistent 40-degree break, lacing it in place so everything stayed tight, and that gave the glove consistency. So the standard glove would have a wide T that's designed to give you the open pocket feel of a double T, but a little bit of the snap closure I love in the single T. The Genetic 4, by contrast, will come with the double T. I went with the anchor T, so you can see hiding it or shining it up in the light that you see a lot of webbing, and that's by design. So the anchor T is going to be a thinner pocket where you get more lace. I love the feel of that because it makes the pocket feel very soft. The standard glove will come with nylon lacing. I went with a custom spec to add skate lace, and then I also get +1 on the pocket, and you can see how ridiculously deep that pocket is. So that is absolutely killer. But again, stock Genetic will have a wider T. So we'll open up the glove a little bit and show kind of one of the hallmarks of the original Genetic and all of the Brian's gloves since then, and that is the BOA system. So this is the BOA system. And as you can see, there are 2 BOA dials inside the glove, which are very, very easy to use in terms of tightening or loosening the glove. And this middle BOA here is something that's probably overlooked a lot, but if you talk to the team at Brian's, they will actually say that this upper BOA is the key, just in the sense that it really can force your palm into the glove and give you much better control and much better ability to close the glove. And there's a sneaky feature, which a lot of the gloves are doing, but I believe Brian's was the first to use in the market, and that is elastic, so that the back piece of the glove can actually move naturally as this gives a little bit, so nothing's fighting your glove as you go to close it. And in terms of design, one of the bigger changes between Optik 1 and Optik 2 is this back piece has been thinned out a little bit to reduce the weight of the glove so it feels more natural on your hand. But as we touch it, there still is pretty good ample padding. And then down here around the B-star and at the fingertips, we've got some much higher density foam to really protect you well, but versus upper parts of the back, it's really been thinned out. And that was one of the biggest things I noticed trying this glove on for the first time in the unboxing video. Check that out on my YouTube page as well. The live unboxing is there to live into eternity. I definitely noticed how much lighter this glove felt just trying it on for the first time. So if you've never tried a BOA dial on, in terms of functionality, it's super easy. Just start twisting the dial, and that's it. It pulls this wire tension close together so you can make it as tight or as loose as you want, and it's never going to slip. So if you sweat during the game, you're not going to have the nylon strap expanding at all. And the other great thing is this is extremely durable. One of the sneaky things Brian's gets right on their gloves, similar to the elastic strap above, is that the BOA dial actually wraps around your wrist right here. And then your wrist, you can see that pad underneath. Your wrist is actually floating back from the wrist cuff. So if you do a real aggressive fingers up, or you like to really have a lot of movement playing your puck, you have all the freedom in the world. Versus some other gloves, the wrist strap actually comes out of the cuff here. So when you tighten the glove, you're actually forcing your hand into the back of the glove cuff, which actually reduces your range of motion. So this is really great with Brian's because you can wear it tight and you still have that range of motion. So that's a very subtle feature that Brian's gets right with their gloves. And I'll just kind of close this well enough. And as you can see, this is out of the box closure. The seal is pretty much perfect. No gaps at all, and it closes very effortlessly. And again, the pocket is absolutely huge. So this is, and then we want to take the BOA off. Just pop it up like that. And one of the other things I noticed while I'm closing the glove a little bit without the BOA on is you can hear that really nice confidence instilling thud. Even though the glove's been lightened up and thinned out a little bit here with the padding, and maybe it's just the way the glove hits together, it just sounds like it's a little bit maybe of a beefier design than the Optik 1. I mentioned that in my unboxing video. And then internally for the glove, we've got the Hex Air padding there. And deep inside the glove, we've got the textured grip material. And then also what I love is this is the Fingerstall Gen Pro. You can see it's the carbon weave. And then it is a nice soft perforated mesh. So even the leather, which makes up kind of the finger adjustment for the thumb, is a really nice, comfortable material. So really well done on the glove. So we already talked about the pocket in terms of custom TGN specs. The other custom spec on here is the glove. I talked a lot about 35-degree break on Genetic and 40-degree break on Optik earlier. This is actually a 90-degree break. So this is my first time trying the 90-degree break in a Brian's. It's a glove I've used on and off for a long time. I'm a huge fan of the 90-degree break. And this is interesting to me because first time using it in a Brian's product, like I said, but what's really cool, I think I can kind of articulate why I feel like I like it so much in this Optik. And again, I haven't used this on the ice, so this isn't a review. This is just kind of out of the box, the overview, the deep dive for anybody considering the 90-degree spec, is that the traditional like CCM, Reebok, Coho 580 is really a very big glove, and everything on it is round. So if you look at like the tip of the T, it's round. If you look at the fingertips, it's round. And again, that's my favorite glove, so I'm not at all bashing the glove. But what's really cool is this is kind of an evolution on that concept, but everything is square. So everything seals very tightly out of the box. And even though the 90-degree break always feels very natural on my hand in terms of closing it, it actually feels like the glove is a little bit more natural as well. So to really try and hammer that point home, to me personally, a 90-degree break feels the most natural. And to me, a 90-degree break means when I close my glove, this is my motion, versus traditionally with an Optik glove, it's gonna be a little bit more of this motion, like a baseball glove where you're bringing your thumb to your fingers and closing it over the middle of your palm. I'm mostly all fingers in terms of my catching orientation. So that's what a 90-degree break is to me and how I'd explain it, and that feels the most natural. But the 580 glove, being that it's an older style and has a lot of those round pieces, this feels like a really nice play on that concept where, given that we've got, again, the square T and this kind of squared off fingertip and a little bit of the curve there, it just seals really well. So it feels like it's a natural break on my hand, and then the glove itself has a little bit of a more natural close to it. But really the proof's obviously in the pudding when I got on the ice. So I could use this thing 3 times and say it stinks. I doubt that's gonna happen, but I'm really curious to see how it holds up compared to the traditional 90-degree break. And one other thing to note too is This is why I think I will prefer an Optik glove over the Genetic, is the Genetic 4 has what I'd call a pancake closure, and that means that the fingers are very straight and the thumb is very straight and it closes very flat, versus if you look inside the Optik, we have a little bit more of a traditional kind of curved fingertips here inside the plastic on the catching surface. So to me, that's a really nice design, and it seems like Brian's has nailed the game ready, but along with keeping a little bit of the curve in the fingers, so it's got that traditional feel, but then it also goes over and seals perfectly. So a couple minor tweaks on the glove that really result in a huge performance improvement just in terms of kind of what I'm feeling out of the box and how it feels on my hand. So now that we are 20 minutes into this video, we've gone through the glove, we've gone through the blocker. I think pads are really the most exciting thing about sets these days. I feel like a lot of times people just gravitate towards the glove break they're used to, and with custom options, you can basically kind of get any glove style now to match any pads. So pads have really, to me, become the driving innovation in terms of harder rebounds, faster sliding, strapping that helps the pad rotate, seal. And I think when most people get excited about sets these days, I think maybe 20 years ago, it may have been the gloves and things like that, or particularly the pad graphic. I feel like pad performance is really in the forefront of the industry right now. And this is Brian's 2020 pad, so Optik 2 will be the first 2020 pad to launch. So it's really cool that you kind of get the NHL stuff when the NHL guys wear it. So we'll dive into the pads, and also I'm fighting a cold, so thanks to everybody who's bearing with the audio if it sounds a little bit different. Believe it or not, a couple days after Halloween, we actually got 5 inches of snow where I live outside of Chicago a couple days ago for Halloween, so just dealing with some crazy weather here. So let's dive in. So Optik 1 was again a completely new pad where Brian's tried to make a stiffer core, a flexible boot, and hard rebounds. And Brian's went away from what was really popular with Sub-Zero and is still available in the Genetic 4, where you have a boot call out, a knee break call out, and a thigh rise call out. And you'd order something like a 4-2-1, which I believe is what I had in my Genetics, which meant 4 flexibility at the boot, 2 at the knee, 1 up top, and 1 is the stiffest, 4 is the softest. With Optik, they just went with fly and flex. Fly meant stiffer, flex meant more flexible, and there are some other tweaks around the boots. So both of those pads have carried over, so you can get the Optik 2 graphic with the Optik 2 strapping, and you can get it with the fly core, the flex core, or the new max core. The new max core is completely new with Optik 2. That is what I opted for on my pads. So we'll start down at the boot and talk our way through these. The max core has the 84-degree boot break. The fly will have the 90. So when we say 90, it's going to be a little bit more squared off. So your boot will actually be like a little wider, basically. So the upside of that option is that it's going to cover more ice and maybe seal a little bit better. The downside of that option is that your pad may catch more depending on your strapping, and you may not quite have the range of motion. And the flex will be an 80 degrees, so that will actually be a little bit thinner. This is the 84, so that might be a little bit more tapered because that's going to be designed for a goalie who wants that maximum range of motion in a flexible pad. And the new max core comes in at 84 degrees. That's always the boot break I get on my Brian, so I'm very happy to see that. In terms of the shape of the pad, the max will actually maybe be a little bit more of an S-curve compared to the fly, but the max is actually going to be the most rigid core. So we talk about pad rigidity with these pads. These pads are still pretty flexible in the terms of stiff versus flexible. There are a couple lines out there, like Bauer 2S jumps to mind, that is really extremely stiff, where like you can barely bend the thigh rise. Check out my Instagram page at the GoalNet. I recently showed a couple different pads compared to the 2S and how stiff they are. So the Brian's pad here seems to be a nice balance if you want flexibility and rigidity all at the same time. So this pad does, it's Again, this is a stiffer pad, so please don't misinterpret what I said, but this is not like a 2x4 on your leg that's going to be so stiff it's going to be uncomfortable to play in. The pad flexes, bounces back to shape. When we talk about the rigidity, a lot of that rigidity is going to be across the face of the pad or the torsional flex. And the reason Brian's wanted to stiffen that up is that Optik should be for a goalie who wants a boxy feel, and you kind of want to hear that nice hard seal. And then when you're moving and rotating, you want your pad to just stay flat and sealed on the ice. And as the goalie, your leg is almost going to move inside the pad while the pad still stays perfectly sealed to the ice. So that is the concept behind the new Max core, which again is going to be Brian's most rigid core they've ever put in a retail pad. And the fly pad will be a little bit more flexible and a little bit straighter profile. And the flex curve is going to be the most flexible pad in the Optik 2 range. So some of the other changes, this pad is going to have a harder face than the Optik 1. The purpose of the harder face is to give you harder rebounds. Brian subscribes to the theory of making a hard face on your pad. And what that does is when the puck hits the hard face, it kind of compresses and then springs off the pad. You've probably heard this me say this before if you watch any of my other videos, but it's the same concept of a golf ball compressing when it hits a titanium driver face. The ball flexes and explodes off a hard, rigid surface. Same concept with a hard face on a goalie pad in the puck becomes the spring. So I love hard rebounds. I'm ecstatic to get these things on the ice and see if they outperform my genetic TGN specs. With my genetics, I put extra HD foam in the face to try and get the rebounds as hard as possible and to try and stiffen up the core. So if we talk about how Optik 2 will be different than Genetic 4, Genetic 4, what I talked about with the rigidity and the flex across the face of the pad, the Genetic 4 is going to be softer. So that pad should feel a little bit more natural on your leg, like your leg and your pad are moving together. Versus with Optik, it's still going to kind of feel connected, but your pad should always feel perfectly sealed to the ice. And it is a little boxier by design, so you should feel your thigh rise and know where your pad is at all times. Versus with Genetic, you want the pad to feel like an extension of your leg. I believe I'm a boxy pad guy. I want to know where that pad is. I want to feel like it's sealed. So all of the changes that Brian's talked about between Optik 1 and Optik 2 with the core all do really speak to me as a goalie. So as I mentioned earlier, please never buy a pad for the graphic. As much as I was kind of joking about that, there are reasons besides the sick graphic why I upgraded to the Optik 2. So some other changes with it are going to be the strapping. So this is a much cleaned up strapping system. So the stock pad, you can get a knee flap up there and run the knee elastic across that. I'm not a fan of that, so I completely removed that. But down here, what's different is Brian's pads usually have more Velcro space on here, and you can kind of mess with the strapping. But the reality is most people wear their strapping in this fashion now when you go down. So Brian's has cleaned that up and basically just put enough elastic for you to kind of figure out depth-wise how tight you want to make it. And the same here where I do the knee elastic down there. But if we open this up, you can see that there is a little bit of there's kind of basically an inner set of wraps, and this inner wrap is only on the inner edge. So that's right here. And then behind that, there is an air pillow. So that same technology I talked about inside the blocker. The whole goal of this new inside wrap piece is probably the biggest change on the pad aside from the core tweaks. And this is designed, like I talked about, this pad is all about seal. This is designed to cushion your leg and put your leg in just the right place so that it's keeping the pad nice and firm and sealed. It's still, like I said, you're gonna notice this pad maybe more than a genetic, but it still should feel connected. So this new wrap system where this is gonna wrap around the goalie's leg, and then this air pillow is gonna allow the goalie's weight to push down better on the wrap. That's gonna allow you to improve the seal. So this is gonna be kind of comfort and connectivity, and that's gonna be for seal. So really excited to get that new strapping on the ice. And as we talk about strapping, there's probably one huge feature you've seen me ignore here, and that is Brian's new rotation strap. So this is an option. So this is an option. And so when I say option, it should be very easy to pop this in and out. There's actually some lacing down in here. So if you don't want the strap, you can just untie that and pop it out. And then if you do want the strap, obviously it should be nice and secure. It's got a nice plastic buckle there. And then inside of it has a padded plush non-slip grip, so this should stay very connected to your leg. This is an option that I'd always done some form of a variation with using the Smart Boot Strap on some of my other Brian's pads, so really cool to see a more formalized, more engineered rotation strap or professor strap, whatever you want to call in the pad. So extremely excited to get this out there. So one of the changes for TGN spec versus stock is the knee landing itself. So the standard knee landing would actually be nylon to about here. And then this back portion will have the same non-slip grip material that's like in the palm of the blocker here, this textured material. And that's so that kind of on any very dynamic plays, you know, between the nylon on the face and the nylon in the stack, that should really allow your knee to rotate nicely. And then if your knee ever were to slide off the stack, Brian's has the textured grip back there to really try and catch you. I've never had any rotational issues at all with any of the Brian sets that I've worn. And I've always just kind of favored the traditional little bit of grip so that when I'm down, I feel nice and connected to the pad rotating, and then the nylon there for good rotation. So I felt not really compelled to try the new option, even though that's a really cool concept by Brian's, going with nylon, a little bit of the grip. Again, I just didn't go with it just being a creature of habit. One thing I did change as well is this piece here is thicker. So I asked for some additional foam. I got into this on the deep dive video as well. Or excuse me, the unboxing video as well. But basically you put a lot of body weight on your pads, 2.5 times your weight when you go down. So I actually asked for additional cushioning just to protect my knees and my cartilage from my own body weight. That's one thing I think the gear manufacturers hopefully can continue to improve on. And this is the entire industry as a whole, but having good ample landing on the knee landing that are within the NHL specs, because the NHL very closely regulates what the knee landing looks like. And then also on the knee pads themselves, making sure that that inner knee edge area is as soft and cushioning as possible to protect all of our knees. So moving up, this is one of hallmarks of Brian's that's pretty unique. The Primo material here, this Velcro piece opens up, and if you want to wear the Brian stock knee pads and Velcro them in for another point of connection, you can do that. This is not a feature I take advantage of, so mine will stay tucked back in there. Going back to the knee block, you can see we have this nice stability wedge here in the back, the Primo material. So believe it or not, even though Primo is amazing for sliding, it actually made its debut on earlier Brian's pads in this area for durability. And that's why we see it in the knee stack, and then obviously in the inner edge for sliding. And then one of the other things I mentioned, which kind of goes hand in hand with me asking for additional cushioning on the landing surface, is that Brian stiffened up the knee block. So generally speaking, when foams are harder, they're going to be better energy transfer because the energy is going to kind of go through the block. And when things are firm, they're going to seal better. So Brian's went with a harder, firm knee block in the pad. So that should improve the seal. And then again, I asked for a little bit of extra padding. So when we compare this to the Genetic, The strapping's gonna be different. We are not gonna have the rotation strap. And then the genetic stock, I believe, will still have a little bit of a softer knee block. So kind of wrapping up the pad features, we can see this is Opti Slide. That debuted on the original Optik. That is a combination of the Primo material, which has a very smooth feel. So it has very little friction with the ice, so it slides like crazy. And then hard foams in this area, kind of going back to what I was just saying about the knee block. Hard foams are better for energy transfer and seal, so should help you seal very well. And should also help energy transfer, so we have nice, good, hard slides. And then again, combined with that new strapping, should be very good doing butterfly slides and in and out of RVH, because you're gonna be more supported and more stable, and then have a fast sliding surface. I've used Brian's OptiSlide enough that, spoiler alert for the review that I will do after I put these pads through their paces, it slides really, really well. And one of the things I will say that Brian's gets right, where there's some other companies in the industry that don't have this dialed in yet, is Primo basically slides well no matter what ice surface it's on. There's some other products I've tested that slide really well on clean ice, but as the ice conditions deteriorate, or say it's a summer skate in a bad rink, you have shitty ice conditions, they don't quite slide as well. So kudos to Brian's with that. And then also the new knee block, we can see everything's laced in. So being that the knee block here is laced in, that's gonna get you better connection with the pad. And then you can see lacing also runs through the knee block here. So whenever you lace something through the knee block and into this edge, it's gonna move everything very tightly. It's gonna move it very connected. So that should help with the stability of the seal. That's something I forgot. And one thing as well I didn't mention, this is designed to have a soft boot, and this does have a very soft, flexible boot, as you can see there. So you should have great connected feel with the pad, and great for getting in and out of RVH. If we go back to some more features compared with Genetic 4, trying to understand the differences, this is a carryover from Optik 1, so no difference with Optik 1, but you can see how thin that outer roll is. So the point of minimizing the outer roll is to reduce weight. In today's pads, the outer roll provide a little bit of functionality, just like kind of why you have a curve on the top of your blocker. It's called reduce skip over, but basically just as pucks hit it, they can't pop over the top edge. So when we have this little bit of a knee roll, it's just in tight. Any pucks coming over should catch the little bit of the ridge here, not fly over, but because it doesn't provide much functionality past that, Brian's has thinned it out. I love that feature, and it's something I requested on my TGN Spec Genetic 4s, and one of the reasons I love it that I don't hear talk about that often is that the thinner roll in the shin, when I do RVH, I go with the shin, so I try and get the post right there in my boot, and with this thinner outer roll, I feel way more connected to the post because I can almost feel my shin against it, versus some other pads I wear with the thicker outer roll. The outer roll is really what touches the post, and I don't feel as connected to it as I'd like. So that is the pad, and then a couple other features as well. This will have Brian's smart bungee system for the smart toe ties. And one of the cool things Brian's does is they put this leather spacer here, and that's designed to simulate with skate laces. You do 2, 3, 4 knots. To keep the boot of your skate a little bit off the toe bridge. And it's actually pretty cool if you check out Robin Leonard. He is using this this leather spacer, but he's using it in conjunction with a skate lace, so that you've got very consistent number of knots every time. And then my custom TGN spec is I go with a reduced toe bridge in the offset tradition. I believe the stock Optik, the bridge will basically run the length of that little center Primo boot piece as well. So that's another custom TGN spec. We can see sizing, so your pad's always gonna say Flex, Flyer, Max, and then the sizing listed on the boot of the pad. And then another subtle feature Brian's always gets right is this little lacing system. Keep an extra skate lace in your bag, loop it through there, loop it through the other pad, and you can throw your pads over the shoulder coming in and out of the rink. So this has been the deep dive on the Brian's Optik 2, of course, in my custom TGN spec, which is a combination of graphic blocker. It's custom Lexan, custom padding behind it. On the glove, it's a custom pocket style with the anchor tee with the skate lace, the 90-degree break, and then also the Nash inside the palm and inside the tee. And that just goes back to softness. And as you can see, comparing it side by side, this is the matte black Brian's and that is the black Nash. So you can see it's a little bit of a different color when we go side by side. So two distinct materials. And then on the pads, just cleaned up the graphic, went with the optional rotational strap, and then cleaned up the knee area by getting rid of the outer flap. And then the biggest custom spec on these is just really the knee block. So if you have any questions, please throw them in the comment section down below or head over to thegoalnet.com. We've got a pretty lively discussion going there. If you're looking for more Optik 2 content, please check out my other video. And I guess one of the things on YouTube you're supposed to do at the end of your videos that I almost rarely ever do is ask people to subscribe. Hopefully, if you like the content I'm doing, you can show some additional support and throw us a subscribe. There's also the GoalNet on Instagram, which recently hit 20,000 followers. And probably next week, I will announce the contest to win that TGN Spec CCM EF4 stick. So thanks again for tuning in. This is the GoalNet signing out.